All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call us to order at 7:43 p.m. Eastern Time. Mr. Vice Chair, since you just did roll call, would you mind doing roll call? Ms. Yanuskavich, do you mind making notes?
No problem.
Thanks.
Oh, shut up, Adrian.
I'm looking at the website for the list of our people. Angela McCardle.
Present.
Me, present. Todd Hagopian.
Here.
Karen Ann Harlows. Not here. Dustin Blankenship.
I am here.
Adrian F. Malagon.
Present.
Stephen Nikela.
Oh, here.
Mike Rufo. Mr. Rufo. Nothing. Kathy, are you here?
No. Yes.
Mr. Heyman.
Present.
Mr. Burt. Mr.
Oh, I
Burke?
think his audio is messed up. He
Oh,
is
yeah.
here. He's been mentioning in the chat, so he
Okay,
is.
cool.
Mr. Burke is here.
Mr. Benner.
Not present.
Mr. Cowan, probably not. Mr. Nana.
I'm here.
Mr. Hirsch. I know I saw his name. Mr. Hirsch.
You gotta unmute, Greg.
He's sleeping.
Can we
Miss
get one of
Hayes.
those jokes in?
Guys beat me to it.
Miss Hayes.
I'm
Mr.
here.
Hirsch is here.
Mr. Alstead.
Present.
Mr. Dassling.
I don't see him, but Will Hyman is attempting to join, so come back to him.
Okay. Mr. Tunyevich.
Present.
Mr. Redpath. Mr. Redpath.
He's not gonna be here.
All right. Ms. Vest. Ms. Vest.
Nope,
Okay. Mr. Dar.
not,
Mr. Dar.
not yet.
Mr. Ford.
Don't see him.
Mr. Hall.
Don't see him. We did
Mr.
have
Rufo did join.
Yep.
So, yeah.
one at-large member joined, and
Mr. Hyman.
Mr. Hyman is here.
there you go.
Cool. Was that a song?
It can be for you, Andrew.
No thanks.
All right, everyone's in. We are going to do public comment now. It's the next item on our invisible agenda. So the way that works is you want to go down to the bottom. There's either raise hand or reactions raise hand. If you want to do that, non-LNC members go first. You have up to 2 minutes. Mr. Watkins, if you don't mind, if you could time it if anyone has public comment.
Yep.
We'll give just a moment. Going once, going twice. I do not see anything. Okay, we're going to skip public comment because we didn't have any takers on public comment. Mr. Malagon, you agendized the meeting, so I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will at this point just turn it over to the treasurer. There are things that he's outlined in his January report, February report, some comments that he's made on Facebook trying to address some stuff. So I would like to have him go over those reports, our financial status as a whole. I'm sure that there will be questions at some point. If we need to go into executive session, I'd be happy to make that motion if it seems appropriate. Other than that, that's really what I want to find out.
Sure. I am ready for that, Madam Chair, if you are.
Absolutely, you may go right ahead.
All right. What I was thinking is I would just run through the PowerPoint that I put out there. I know everyone's probably looked at it, but just run through it so that everyone can ask questions if they want. and then also go through that Facebook post, because in it, I tried to allay some of the concerns that I think people drew the wrong assumptions from the PowerPoint, but then also kind of highlight some of the stuff where we do have concerns so that we can kind of get Q&A, out of the way for people who are watching the meeting and who do have concerns. So I will try to share the correct screen here. All right, tell me when you guys can see this.
Yep.
Okay. So real quick, from a definitional standpoint, cash is considered how much cash we have in bank accounts. Unrestricted cash is how much cash we have in bank accounts that we can use per the policy manual for basically whatever we want that's in the budget. There are certain types of restricted cash. The majority is convention. Sometimes we have building accounts or legal accounts that are also restricted. Right now, it's almost 100% convention cash. Total accounts for the purposes of this document are total cash plus investments accounts, which we normally don't have, but we do have a $25,000 money market at the moment, having to do with the bond we had to put up for the Michigan lawsuit. Is that correct, Madam Chair? Was that a bond? I can't remember the exact.
Sorry, it's a letter of credit.
Letter of credit. That's what it was. Yeah, sorry. So, okay, so we basically had to put $25,000 in cash to the side. Then the bank then writes a letter of credit. It's the alternative to actually handing them $25,000 of cash. So that's just cash plus our investment accounts. And then reserve adequacy is how much cash the party projects to have to fund forward-looking operations. So this is kind of a equation that we've made up. I've never seen it used in other organizations, but it is helpful. It basically excludes restricted funds like restricted bank accounts, but then also excludes things that we can't spend, or sorry, excludes things that we know are coming that we owe money on, but then includes things that we've already paid that are on the balance sheet in other ways. So it's a good way to look at the go forward. Here are the trends that we're seeing. So when you look at total cash, and this is why I put the trends in here, because this whole financial disaster, everyone's freaking out. Like we need to kind of put it in perspective. Cash, you can see we've got more cash today than we had, late last year. It is going down from the high, but overall cash is good. Now that includes convention. So when you go down to restricted cash, that's where the concern comes in. And we knew this was going to happen when we met in December. We talked about how the budget was going to have 120,000 in revenue and the expenses were going to be more than 120. And this was going to get down close to zero by the time we got to convention. And we knew if we didn't get the 120 in revenue, that we were going to have to cut expenses. I'll get to that a little bit. They've done good on expenses, but this has gone down significantly, and it's gone down pretty fast over the last month. And that was really the purpose of my original note. Total account, though, is in a really good spot. So again, when you look at cash plus investments, which normally would be in unrestricted cash even, we're in a good shape there. And then the reserve adequacy, though, is extremely low. So $40,000 is as low as we've been in this LNC. There were times when they got well below that in previous LNCs, but this is the lowest we've been, and we try to keep at about 75,000 for reserve adequacy going forward. Any questions on the trends before we dive into kind of what they mean and how we got there? Okay. Summary of the trends. So cash, we had over 200 of cash at the end of February. We are not broke. Our cash is just locked up in different buckets that we cannot touch per the policy manual or other agreements like the letter of credit. Unrestricted cash, the number has fallen dramatically. The number has fallen dramatically. The number hit 37K before the previous LNC was forced to take out a loan. So we're still at about 80 per this last month. And I think Angela and I just did the math yesterday, and we're still around 80. So if that is the case at the end of March, we're still better than we were when we took the loan 2 years ago, March, but it is getting close to that number. And so we need to have a plan for if we have a bad month, we're right down in that range. Total accounts again, that includes the letter of credit, money market, cash reserve adequacy is the one that we've talked about, that if we basically don't have enough there to sustain one more bad month like February or two more mildly bad months. When we look at the revenue overview, this is where we're really getting hit. We put a budget in at 236, so about 118 a month. It was supposed to be conservative. We've come up 65 short in the first 2 months. Most of that, frankly, was this last month. It was just a really bad February, which is why we had the steep drop in the reserve adequacy. Major fundraising shortfalls has been other membership. Ballot access has been a pretty large shortfall, and recurring revenue, not as big, but still bigger than we expected. We need to be prepared for the lower revenue months from now until convention, so we need to have a plan for if that continues. If that does happen, we need to have contingency plans on how to maintain enough cash flow to run the party, and we need to address the fundraising shortfalls immediately, which the chair can speak to a little later because those are in progress. Going to fundraising effectiveness. So in the budget, we had 57K of fundraising expense and 236K of revenue. I've talked about wanting a 5-to-1 return. We budgeted a 3-to-1 return. We are getting a 3-to-1 return. We're just spending less. And it's not as simple as just saying we need to spend 16,000 more and we would have made 236. We have to decide if we can spend 16 to make the extra 60. But the point here is we need to be having that discussion, and if there are things that we can spend on to get the 3-to-1, we should be doing that instead of spending on some other stuff is kind of where this is going. So effectiveness is not necessarily the issue. We're still not spending enough to hit the targets, and we're seemingly not taking advantage of the ballot access season, meaning our ballot access fundraising is down, even though this would be the season where we would assume that it would be up. We also aren't spending in that category where we had budgeted that we would. So determine if we can spend more and keep our effectiveness above 300% ROI. Half of the fundraising expense shortfall has been in ballot access. Can we amp this up? And the chair has engaged in getting a fundraising audit underway to see how we can improve here. Let her speak to that at the end here. Expense overview, this is actually a good thing. So we would be in a worse position if staff and the chair hadn't been very good on expenses. So the budget was 281,000 for the first 2 months. We've come in at 235, so we spent 45,000 less than budget.
And you had a whole entire meal.
Okay, the ballot access, we spent 40,000 less. Salary and related, we spent 22,000 less. Fundraising, again, we spent 16,000 less. There were 2 areas where we spent more, which I'll touch on. Professional services, we spent more on. This was primarily due to a little bit of legal and a lot of accountant, which I'll talk about. Outreach and activism and campaign, we spent 19,000 more on that bucket. We were supposed to be really tight on that bucket in the first 2 months, and we ended up spending more than we assumed we would there. But again, overall, the spend has gone down. The question is how can we spend less on the other stuff and more on the fundraising going forward? If we have stuff to spend it on, that'll be effective. So we cannot lower spending enough to mitigate the revenue shortfalls. That's the clear answer here is we can't lower spending enough to withstand $80,000 months. So we need a 2-way solution. Cannot lower spending on fundraising, but raise spending on other non-revenue producing categories. And we have already authorized major ballot access spending that will come through soon, which we talk about in another slide here. So the ballot access expense analysis, these are the three that have been approved. 25K for Virginia, 5K paid out as each 20% milestone is hit. It looks like we would be on the hook for about 5 to 10K per month in April and May, depending on how fast those signatures are coming in. We believe they're coming in at about 500 signatures a week right now, which would be closer to that $10,000 a month in April and May. New Mexico, 35,000 approved. Again, 5K paid out as each 20% is hit. That's coming in closer to 250 signatures a week. So we think that'll be closer to the 5,000 per month in April and May, but of course could go higher. Kentucky, 32.5 is approved. 5K is due now. We may have already cut that check. So I said now, but I didn't check to see if we had cut it. They are putting another 5 in, and then once that first 10,000, our 5 and their 5 is exhausted, we have 27.5 that is due. Likely May is when we would have to pay that out unless we delay. We need a plan to determine if we can keep petitioning full force in New Mexico and Virginia until convention. So can we afford to make these payments? My recommendation is that we delay Kentucky Drive until it is clear that we have the cash. And again, maybe we can do the R5 and their 5 and then just tell them they're getting the 27.5 right after convention. But we need to make sure that 27.5 isn't due before convention. Do not start any additional drives until we have a path to fully fund these 3 drives. There were not a whole lot of drives that we were even considering starting prior to convention. This is just a note that there were a few drives that we decided not to do. So if anybody gets a bug to do one of those drives, we just need to remember that we don't have the money for it unless something changes. And those drives that we decided not to do, if people remember, were Illinois, New York, and DC primarily. So if any of those suddenly pop up and we want to fund them, we would be hard pressed to do so at the moment. I'll make a stronger statement there. We can't do it at the moment unless something changes. So, professional service expense analysis. This is a little concerning. So accounting, when they originally proposed to Angela and myself, and I think it was Lainey at the time.
No, Lainey.
Yeah, it was. Okay. It was supposed to be about $3,500 a month. It ended up being a lot more than that. Angela and I have been on the phone frustrated with them several times trying to get the costs down. But at the end of the day, they charge by the hour, and our team uses a lot of hours, primarily because of the FEC and because of fixing past mistakes and. But anyway, we budgeted $6,500 a month because we knew we were using more hours than what they had originally quoted us. But it's been coming in at $10,000 a month for the first 2 months. I answered this in the Facebook, but just to put it out there, I think a lot of that is because they are helping us with the audit for the first 2 months, and that'll go into March as well. But it's just something we need to keep an eye on, because obviously if it went to $10,000 a month times 12 months, we're way over budget. Legal, we have overspent by 5, and we just approved more. We're on pace to bust that budget by August. Again, that's on pace is kind of a weird thing with legal because it comes in fits and spurts. So that was just a straight line. Cannot sacrifice the other items to spend here. Audit, this is a big one. There was no payment made to our auditor last year. This mistake was recently brought to light when the auditor asked us for the 2023 bill, which we had not heard about. So it went somewhere, but not to anybody who could pay it. And then it was never heard of again until 2024. So doubly bad. As we rolled the budget over, you take the prior year's budget and then you add and subtract from the prior year's budget. So there was no audit payment in the prior year's budget. So then it didn't get budgeted for 2024. So this is me. This is on me. Or the 2024 piece at least is on me. Due to this, though, we now need to make 2 large unplanned payments to auditing firms. One of them we've already taken care of. $18,000, I believe, was paid to Fry and Company, I believe, in March. And so
Yep.
that, yeah, that's right. Okay, so that's been taken care of. But the other one will be due soon, and I think that's gonna be a similar payment size, maybe a little higher, so. Our accounting vendor is far more expensive. Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. Our accounting vendor, this is accounting, not audit, is far more expensive than they promised, needs to be addressed. Need to amend the legal and accounting line items. This is not, this is not something that has to happen tomorrow, but we just need to amend them long term for the budget for the year. Again, you don't have to amend something until the annual budget gets busted. So we're months away from being forced to amend it, but we should amend it if we know we're going to bust the budgets. And then the amendments will go out in the email ballots following the April meeting is my plan, unless we all decide that it's better to have the new LNC make the amendments, which I would be amenable to, so that we don't force something on them. They can always change the budget too. So,
Guys, please make sure you mute.
last thing I put here, action items. These are just my recommendations, so we can do what this body decides. But the action items I'm recommending is preserve cash, pay minimums on the credit card until convention. This isn't unheard of. We've done it by accident over the summer. It causes no problem with the FEC. It causes no problem with our accounting. It's just smart cash management if you need to make sure you have enough cash in your bank account to make payments to vendors and to employees. So pay minimums until convention, pay with the credit card when allowed. So I don't know how often we are choosing to pay with the credit card or choosing not to pay with the credit card when we could. Hold cash in the bank whenever possible. Secure a credit line probably doesn't need to be number 2 on this list, but we can talk through it. Secure a credit line on the building for emergencies. I would prefer that we do this prior to needing the money. In the last LNC, what happened is they came with a $135,000 request to try and secure a credit line and then put $135,000 on the credit line. They backed off of that and ended up putting, I believe, 50 onto the credit line immediately when they did the credit line. It'd be much better if we just had a credit line. I believe we've already passed a motion inside the policy manual or somewhere where it said what a credit line could and could not be used for. So we would restrict the use to that or something different. Convention audit, use our budget hinged on the fact that we would make a significant, our budget hinged on the fact that we would make a significant amount on convention. We need to review revenue and expenses, understand exactly what our expectations are. If the convention is going to fall short, we need to make significant changes to the budget now. Now we did backfill the budget. So I mean, if convention falls short, all we have to do is cut expenses in the back half of the year where we put in more expenses. So we can make that work. We just need to do the amendments if we decide it's going to fall short. I also have no data that tells me it's going to fall short. It's just that we planned for a hefty convention, so we just need to understand if that's going to happen. Cash must be preserved to ensure that LNC will operate smoothly during critical election. Having but not using a credit line is a smart move. Treat as an emergency cash reserve. And need to amend the budget early if convention is going to fall short to and need to amend early if convention is going to fall short to avoid further holes. 1 second, I'm going to have to plug in here. I will stop there and ask for questions while I get some power.
I have a question.
Yep.
Are we aware of where things fell through the crack with that audit payment that was missed, or 2 audit payments that were missed?
Angela, do you want to touch on that? Yeah.
I'm trying to think about what I want to say.
Madam Chair, if I just may make a quick point of order, this is an executive committee meeting, so shouldn't executive committee members get preference for questions?
Yes, you are correct. You are correct. Point well
So
taken.
I was going to ask the similar question. I was just going to be a bit more specific about what Ms. Hayes was going to ask. So the treasurer just said that the invoice for the 22 audit went somewhere to someone that it couldn't be paid. How much elaboration can we get out can we get on that outside of executive session? The amount I believe was 18.5 that he gave, but I'm curious as to how that was just paid and how this was missed,
Sure.
which affected the 2023 budget.
So our former auditor said that he emailed it to two particular people prior to the end of the year. I went through and searched in those two email accounts and I didn't see it. It doesn't exist. And I had another staff member search it and she came up with the same result. So does that mean that he definitely didn't send it? No, but it means that it's not anywhere. It's not where he said it would be. So, I mean, ultimately, we've got to be responsible for paying bills and anticipating them at that time. I was not doing the bill pay. We had a former staffer taking care of that who's no longer here. Two of them, actually, I think. So, that's the situation.
I have a follow-up question to that. What is the date of the invoice?
That's a really good question.
What was the date? What was the date of the invoice?
Let me look. Ms. Yanuskavich, do you have, can you see which of us pulls it up faster?
Yes, well, I do know that it was through the end of September billing cycle. So it was at least then, I believe that it was early October, the bill was sent.
Well, that
So-
was allegedly sent.
Well, right. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Madam Chair.
Due 9/30/2023. That's what it says. That's not the date that I have is 3/16/24 is the first time I saw it. And Ms. Kennedy and I searched for it prior to this date, could find no evidence of it getting paid in QuickBooks. And could find also just no evidence of it existing. And so it was a big question mark for us in the coming weeks before we got this invoice.
So a follow-up question to that would be if so the last invoice that we actually know of is somewhere in September. That's what Ms. Yanuskavich said, right? So there was one allegedly that was sent in
that's
March.
the date of it. Yeah, allegedly sent. I received it in March and it was dated for 9/30.
Okay, so those two people, so I'm just still trying to understand this because
Sure.
the two people that we're referencing were already gone. The last one in August. How does this get missed for 5 months? I'm assuming this was just paid this month or at the end of February.
We just paid it in March.
Because I mean, what, 5 months to go without paying this that affected how we do the 2023 audit is disconcerting to me. And it leads to some other questions. And I don't know if you would be the appropriate person to ask or the treasurer, but I mean, we have large expenditures coming up and I appreciate the presentation that Mr. Hagopian made. I was just taking some notes throughout, but I think the things that matter here the most are the restricted income and the cash reserves. And we have, I mean, I can't talk about this outside of executive session, but we do have, at the very least that I know of, outside of what would be the new audit bills coming up that are due before the end of April. And I'm wondering what the plan is as far as perhaps cutting expenses, raising revenue to make sure that those bills are covered.
Well, we can talk about that in executive session, where we talk about expense cutting. But yeah, I have a number that I think you're all going to be comfortable with, relieved by, whatever. As far as the bills situation goes, yeah, they were not, it was not getting covered. I don't think that this was ever sent. And when we noticed that it wasn't paid, it was a huge red flag, which is why we dug through to see what was going on. And there are some additional questions that I think we should talk about in executive session. Because there were a whole bunch of red flags to me, but I couldn't make sense of it until this popped up, and some of it I'm still kind of wondering, like, how did this not get sent to me? How did this not appear? I should be notified. I mean, it should have come directly to my inbox. because it's a very large bill. But it didn't, and, you know, I think that that was a fairly normal practice for this organization in the past. Chair, treasurer weren't notified when particularly large bills came in. They just, whoop, you know, in and out. And so, yeah, it's a problem. I absolutely agree. I think going forward, problems like these hopefully won't continue to appear because we have totally new systems of checks and balances in place now. Mr.
So just a
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, just a follow-up question to that. Would you, so just make sure I understand when you're saying it was, they're saying it was sent, as in the auditors were saying that the bill is sent, but we have no record of it. They said that they sent it X date,
Correct.
which would be sometime in March, and we have no record of receiving it in
No.
any email correspondence until it came to light in September.
Correct.
It's the opposite, right? So they said
So,
that they
in
sent it
March.
in Q3.
It came to light in March.
Yeah, they said they sent it in Q3 of 23, Adrian.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Fry came back to us and was like, once we told him that we weren't going to use him for the next audit, and said, hey, you owe me all this money.
Personally, I
see.
find it a little odd that you wouldn't come collecting at the end of the year. I don't dispute that we owe the bill. We certainly do. I thought the whole thing was weird. And I was aware that we probably hadn't paid it a couple weeks prior to it popping up. And staff and I were doing our due diligence to see if we could uncover any history of it being paid. Perhaps it was paid out of an account it shouldn't have been paid out of. Perhaps it was paid from an account or a credit card that had been closed. We were digging around and we were very curious and didn't find anything. And it was still sort of open-ended. And this, you know, certainly, well, it mostly answers what happened. And maybe it was just human error. You know, and he might have a lot of clients too, and perhaps he just like forgot to send a bill, and you know, those things happen in small businesses.
Thank you to both of you. If I think the rest of my questions would probably be better reserved for executive session.
Okay, Mr. Tunievich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things. First, one is for the treasurer. Todd, when did we start segregating convention cash that was received? In what month of the reports that we as LNC members receive, did that begin happening?
So here is the answer. We've been segregating the cash the whole time, meaning you could see it on the reports, how much was convention and how much was not. And we've been segregating it on the balance sheet the entire time. Once it got brought to our attention that the policy manual did actually require a separate account, we reopened the account or restarted using the account. I can't remember, Angela, in February, and put the money back into the account.
Yep. Great. Thank you. And just as an aside, relative to the prior conversation about the invoice, wouldn't be the first time an accounting firm forgot to send an invoice, and it's 18 grand in the grand scheme of things. To me, this is one of the least things we need to talk about. I know it impacts this year, but the other question I have has to do with, Todd, you were pointing out how, hey, we're in pretty good shape, even compared to the same cycle 2 years ago. We've got more than they had then, but have all the same bills been paid? So, for example, typically by this time of year, deposits for the AV vendor, the hotel, etc., those checks have already been cut. Have they at this point? And if not, what kind of money are we looking at for those initial deposits?
Yeah, and I do not know that in terms of the convention account I think you're referencing, because those would not come out of our account. Those would come out of the convention account. So do not know that. And just to be clear, like I'm not out there saying we're way better than we were 2 years ago or anything like that. I'm just showing that in terms of where we were 2 years ago and in terms of now, there's not a dramatic difference. And 2 years ago, we weren't in good shape. So I'm not saying we're in good shape now. You know what I mean?
I do, but because I don't know how much those deposits are, and perhaps whether it's Mr. Malagon or the chair is more aware of those sums, it doesn't give us any context to say, okay, well, do we have 50 grand due in deposits? Do we have less? Do we have more? So if there's some context that could be given to that, Madam Chair, it would be appreciated.
Sure. We have not made deposits yet. We also don't have a final AV contract to sign. We'll go over all of that with the convention committee on Monday. And I think I can probably provide a summary and documentation after that meeting. Ms. Yanuskavich and I went over it just a couple of hours ago, all the remaining contracts and outstanding invoices and deadlines. And I believe we still have a couple of weeks before anything is actually due.
Great. And then just the last question, Madam Chair, and maybe this is going to be handled in the COC meeting as well. And that is the type of penalties we may be subject to if, for example, our food and beverage minimums are not made, or the increase in rental charge that might take place if we don't make those food and beverage minimums. Are we in your estimation, I know it's still a little early, are we at risk of not meeting either our food and beverage or our room block minimums as it stands today?
I think the room block minimum has already been met. I think it's
Great.
been more than met.
Great.
Food and beverage minimum, we're not there yet, but we still have a couple of weeks of heavy promotions. And I think we have until the 20th to get the rest of food and beverage in. And some of that is going to be strategy too. There's potential discounts we can take. There's potential numbers we can give them and then continue to sell. So I think it's a little bit more complicated than just have we met the minimum, or it might just, rather than complicated, it might just be a little premature.
Sure. I'm worried about the penalties, obviously, because I know they can be significant.
I'm not freaking out over food and beverage penalties
No.
right now. I'm concerned about overall convention sales, but F&B minimum is not at the top of my concerns.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all.
Ms. Yanuskavich?
I just wanted to say that you can see the convention revenue and the expenses that have been paid for the convention in the financial reports. And the only expenses that are recorded there was in December of 2023 for 1,274 in response to Mr. Tanevich's question. And the January and February reports show no expenses that have been paid toward the convention. And the food and beverage minimum, I do not believe there's a penalty. We just have to pay it. We have to pay the minimum whether we sell it or not. But it also includes alcohol, so that's an unknown. Libertarians like to drink at these things, so that it is premature to be worrying about that.
We can pay the minimum and continue to sell packages if we want. And so that's really like something that I need to discuss with the convention committee. But that's why you don't see me in a panic over that one. Do we have additional questions on what our treasurer mentioned his presentation? I have a couple of comments I can make. There's some stuff that I need to say for executive session where I'd like to get very granular with you and share how we're cutting costs. I've been, monitoring our revenue situation over the last, for several months. And, what I've told staff is that we need to be making $125,000 a month non-convention revenue, minimum. And the drop dead, like I better not ever see it drop below number is $100,000. And to not be confused about that being the goal. That's that's like a red alert number. But please, don't let it drop even below that. And that's what I've communicated to them. And there have definitely been some things that I was upset about, and they've been communicated very clearly. And there were some errors made and some, reprimands and cautionary, words given. And some consequences at the end of this month for not meeting the goals. So I don't want people to think that we were just not watching what was going on. There have definitely been some consequences for what's happened. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in executive session. But I think that's like a good thing for me to share just with the LNC at large and the general membership.
Before I move to go into executive session, is there anything that anyone would like to ask or say?
Let me
Assuming,
see.
Madam Chair, that this would be an appropriate time, unless you have anything else you'd like to add for general session.
Yeah, let me think about something else. January, we paid for our Freedom Fest booth. That's why January's political or outreach and activism expense went up, and we got a steep discount for buying it early. So that's why that jumped up. And that's the only large event that we've committed to do this year. I went to CPAC. It was an extremely productive meeting, but I think the whole trip was like around $1,000. And the flights were less because I used like all of my flight points on United or American, whichever it was, to get the cost way down. What else? Let me see. I might have a couple more things. So cut expenses. We've got nearly $17,000 in expenses to cut on a monthly basis. So that was basically the number that I thought we absolutely had to cut so that we are not going over. We have contracted with a marketing vendor to help with Google AdWords. I've actually engaged, although we haven't I guess engaged is not the right word. I've nearly signed a contract with 2 of them and gone back and forth on it. Because they both have slightly different approaches. I might end up changing one. I'm unsure. I kind of would like to go over that in a more granular fashion in executive session. I think something else that we should sort of be mindful of is that we as a political party try to do a lot of things at once. And, looking back over the last year and a half, I think we've tried to do too much. I think that we've tried to run an operations-based organization and like a donation/sales-based organization, and it's been a problem. It's been a problem in resource allocation. It's definitely been a conflict with our priorities, providing support to 50 state affiliates, while also trying to do ballot access, while trying to do membership. It's a lot to juggle with a small staff and competing ideas about what should be our biggest priority. I think it also creates challenges with organizational focus. There's a lack of clarity because staff is not particularly clear on what their primary focus should be, because they're told you have to have 2 or 3 primary focuses. We have to make a lot of money, but we also have to service our affiliates. I think that it's a mismatched culture for us sometimes because we have to be very operations heavy, but then we also have to be very fundraising heavy. And very large organizations like, whatever, Apple, Microsoft, giant sales companies, like they can manage that, but it's perhaps too much for an organization of our size. The customer, donor experience has not been great because of it, because I know that there are a lot of affiliates and members who've been frustrated by X, Y, and Z. And it's difficult for staff to have the bandwidth to manage all of that. And, what we're really seeing right here is cost control. And trying to excel in multiple things is expensive. Trying to maintain efficient operations while you also maintain really robust operations and also have a totally separate, dedicated, aggressive fundraising department ends up becoming expensive. I think that it presents challenges with strategic alignment, and that we need to get a little bit clearer internally on how our strategy aligns operations and fundraising. I think that one of the things that we really encountered with Civi CRM challenges is that we didn't scale very well when it came to operations, and it became too expensive. And that pulled, especially with the migration, not the current one, but the previous one, it pulled all of staff's focus off of fundraising. And it was very difficult to get everybody properly reoriented after that. And there's more, but those are just like a handful of the things that I have noticed And it's my takeaway from working closely with them and just seeing how our organization operates. I think those are some things that have impacted our financials and have made it more difficult to make money than it should be. Ms. Yanuskevich.
I was just wondering in public session if you'd like to comment on any of the expenses in February that led to such a huge bite out of the cash reserve.
Oh, so Freedom Fest was January. Let me take a look. Sorry, I'm scrolling through a spreadsheet. Expenses. We're still paying G Suite. Contractor for consulting for Civi, G Suite. Bit Titan. I am not seeing the big one where I'm at. I might need to like take a minute to dig through. I'm sorry, I didn't have that.
I'll dive through QuickBooks while we keep going. I'll dive through QuickBooks and make some comments.
Yes. You can make comments now if you want while I'm trying to.
No, let me dig through QuickBooks is what I'm saying. You can do it.
Oh, yeah,
Let me
of
find
course.
some bullet points for you.
I'm trying to find our accounting firm bill. I can't find it. I had January pull up earlier. Let me check who that is. Oh, that's Ms. Vest. Ms. Yanuskevich, can you note that Ms. Vest and Mr. Ford came in late?
Yes.
Thanks. I see some staff costs in February.
We don't have to take the time now if
Yeah, I mean, I can
we can
put
move
it on
on.
the list. It looks like we had a voter gravity bill, which is a fairly good chunk.
Yeah, let me chime in. So remember that expenses actually weren't super high in February. It was more a matter of revenue being super low.
Okay.
So we did spend 10,000 in ballot access. We did spend 10,000 on the accountant. We spent 10,000 on legal. So I mean, there were a couple of bills that overdrove. But the main thing that happened in February was 80 grand in revenue. Do you know what I mean?
Yep,
Yeah.
there you
So
go.
yeah, I just want to make sure that's clear. Like I should have caught that when you asked the question, but That's that whole thing where we've actually spent 45,000 less this year than we were budgeted to. So February was not a big spend month. It was just a big spend month if we were going to miss revenue by that much.
There you go. And we're going to talk about, we'll talk, we're like really granular about it in an executive session, but we have a way to reduce our accounting bill, I think by $3,500 a month. So there's that. Actually, let me mention a few things. Let's see. We're gonna, our accounting bill is gonna go down. Some of our tech assets are gonna go down, and staff went through the IT stuff and found some stuff that they can cut. So that's gonna go down, and then there are a couple of other things that I'll be very, very particular about in executive session. But we did find nearly $17,000 worth to cut. And they knew that this was coming. If March didn't produce the results that we needed, they knew this was going to happen. That's, I think that's about all I've got. I try to give as much information as possible to the general public and anybody who's not going into executive session. And at the April 7th meeting, I'll have more information for you. I just don't have the results of the fundraising audit yet. She knows I need it by the April 7th meeting. And I'll have the results of a marketing audit too, although it is embarrassingly sparse since we don't have Google AdWords, or it didn't exist at that time. That's what I got. Mr. Malgon, I'll turn it over to you if you want to make your motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to go into executive session with the XCOM and all LNC members with the exception of Mr. Tunievich and Ms. Vest to discuss pending contracts, contractual negotiations, staff, whatever the chair would like to add to that. And that's it. It's my motion.
Mr. Blankenship?
While I'm not a member of the XCOM, I just want to say that I will not be attending an XCOM meeting without the entirety of the LNC tonight, because I truly do feel we need advisement of all people, regardless of whether you agree with them or like them. And Mr. Malgon, you know I love you, but that's my opinion.
If I may just respond to Mr. Blankenship, Madam Chair. So again, the reasons for this are not, I don't like Mr. Tunievich or Ms. Vest. That's beyond the point. I think everyone already knows that. There's no point in hiding it. Mr. Tunievich has verifiably violated confidentiality, and Ms. Vest continues to ask for questions that are confidential in nature on the public list to kind of spark some sort of outrage. If we're going to have productive conversation in executive session, we can't have them there. And I very much doubt that their input would do anything but make things worse. Thank you.
Okay, the motion needs a second. From someone on the executive committee.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to go into executive session to discuss contracts and staff with the exclusion of Mr. Tunievich and Ms. Hayes.
Ms. Vest, not Ms. Hayes.
I'm so sorry to both of you. Are there any objections from executive committee members?
I object.
Okay, Mr. Hagopian objects. Would you like to speak to your objection, and then we're just going to go to a vote if that's okay with everyone?
Yeah, so obviously I made the same comments last time. I think that everyone needs to be in these meetings. I think that it's important to get all different points of view, and more importantly, this time, we would basically be excluding 2 regions because the other people in those regions aren't here. So again, if this happens, I'm going to have to not be in executive session, and obviously this is one that I would rather be in. But that is what it is. I think I made that clear last time, and that's my stance. So.
Thank you, Mr. Hagopian. Okay, Ms. Yanuskavich, do you mind just keeping an informal tally for me? Okay. So, all in favor of going into executive session with the for the purposes stated with the exclusion of particular members. I'm going to start with Mr. Malagon,
Aye.
Ms. Yanuskavich,
Yes.
okay. Mr. Nikela,
No, we need you, Todd.
so that's a no. Okay, Mr. Hagopian,
No.
okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Who am I missing? I'm so sorry.
Mr. Watkins.
Mr. Watkins?
Yes.
Yes. That's 5. Who else?
We're missing Miss Harlow, so she's not here, so there's only 6 votes.
Okay.
You would be the last vote.
Is this is this
Is it Mr. Rufo?
no.
This would require a majority, so your vote would
I don't think we do
so it
that.
would use the time.
A tie with her voting
It would be a
means the
tie.
vote would fail.
There's 3 in favor and 2 opposed.
Correct.
Then I don't think you require my vote. I think the vote just passes with the chair not voting.
Your vote would make a difference, Madam
Correct.
Chair.
Mr.
Your vote would-
Tuniavich, you're out of order.
It's
You are
okay.
not an executive committee member.
It's okay, guys. It's okay, guys. Chair is not voting on this. The motion passes as it is. I am going to take the liberty of writing up, although it's not going to be things that are discussed in executive session that must be kept in executive session. I will write up a comprehensive financial report regarding our cuts and distribute that to all LNC members, including LNC members who have been excluded, so that they're not missing any financial information. Because I think that's the right thing for me to do.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Okay, we are going to stand at ease for 2 minutes if you need to while we go into executive session. All right, we're back from executive session. There were no motions noticed for this meeting, so we're not having any motions. There's one thing left. We are missing Ms. Yanuskavich, who was with us in executive session. We are also missing Pat Ford, but that's okay.
And our note taker, Ms. Yanuskavich, is our de facto
Yeah.
secretary.
But that's all right. Ms. Harlos will review the recording and then she'll give us some minutes. Okay, so there's only one thing left on the agenda for this evening.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you. Do we have a second? All right, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Any objections? Going once, going twice, hearing none. We are adjourned at 10:32 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be in touch soon.
Good night.
See you all.
See you, everyone. Take care, guys.